The Central African Republic, a landlocked nation in the heart of Africa, bordered by Cameroon, Chad, Sudan, South Sudan, the Democratic Republic of Congo and the Republic of the Congo. Its heart beats with the rhythm of the rainforest, its soul reflected in the flow of the Ubangi River. This is a land rich in resources, from diamonds and gold to timber and uranium. Yet it remains one of the poorest countries in the world. A tragic paradox defines the Central African Republic, a land of immense potential trapped in a cycle of conflict and instability. The Central African Republic is home to a diverse population of nearly 5 million people. They speak a tapestry of languages, Sango, French, and numerous indigenous tongues. Their history is a blend of ancient empires, colonial influence, and a hard-fought independence. Yet this rich cultural heritage is overshadowed by the spectre of conflict. This is a story of a nation grappling with chaos, a story about the struggle for survival and the enduring hope for a brighter future.
The Central African Republic is a nation at a crossroads. For years, it has been locked in a brutal civil war. Rebel groups, often divided along religious lines, clash with government forces and each other. The violence is relentless, displacing hundreds of thousands of people. Villages are destroyed, families torn apart, and innocent lives lost. The economy is in ruins, with most people living in abject poverty. Basic services like healthcare and education have collapsed. Hospitals lack medicine, schools are closed, and the future of an entire generation hangs in the balance. The international community has responded with peacekeeping missions and humanitarian aid. The Central African Republic is a stark reminder of the human cost of conflict.
The roots of the Central African Republic's current crisis run deep, entwined with a history marked by colonial exploitation and the struggle for self-determination. The seeds of discord were sown during the brutal reign of European colonialism. The French colonial administration extracted the region's resources with ruthless efficiency, leaving the local population mired in poverty. This economic exploitation was coupled with a system of political and social control designed to suppress any form of dissent or resistance. The arbitrary borders drawn by colonial powers, often dividing ethnic groups and ignoring historical ties, further exacerbated tensions, creating a powder keg of unresolved grievances.
The year 1960 marked a turning point for the Central African Republic, as it did for many African nations. After decades of French rule, the country finally achieved its independence. However, the euphoria of liberation was short-lived, soon giving way to the sobering realities of nation-building in the shadow of colonialism. The newly independent nation inherited a legacy of exploitation, inequality, and ethnic division, a toxic cocktail that would fuel decades of instability. The first president, David Dacko, struggled to unite the country's diverse ethnicities and forge a national identity. His government, plagued by corruption and inefficiency, failed to address the deep-seated grievances of the marginalized population.
Section 3. The Rise and Fall of Emperors. Bokassa's reign of terror lasted over a decade, during which time the Central African Republic became synonymous with repression and extravagance. The emperor, obsessed with his own image, surrounded himself with luxury while his people starved. His government, riddled with cronyism and incompetence, failed to provide even the most basic services to its citizens. Opposition to Bokassa's rule grew steadily throughout the 1970s, culminating in a series of protests and uprisings. In 1979, Bokassa's excesses reached a tipping point, leading to his overthrow by French troops. However, this change in leadership did little to address the underlying issues plaguing the Central African Republic.
Section 4. Cycles of Rebellion. The overthrow of Bokassa did not usher in an era of peace and stability as many had hoped. Instead, the Central African Republic found itself trapped in a cycle of coups, rebellions, and political violence. Dako's second stint in power was short-lived, ending in another coup in 1981, this time led by General André Kolingba. Kolingba's rule, though less flamboyant than Bokassa's, proved no less authoritarian. The late 1980s and early 1990s witnessed a resurgence of demands for democracy and multi-party elections across Africa, and the Central African Republic was no exception.
Section 1. Descent into chaos. The mid-1990s saw the Central African Republic teetering on the precipice of a full-blown civil war. François Bozizé, a disgruntled former army chief, launched a rebellion against the government, plunging the country deeper into turmoil. The conflict escalated rapidly, drawing in neighboring countries and exacerbating existing divisions within the Central African Republic. Amidst this chaos, ordinary citizens were caught in the crossfire, their lives upended by the constant threat of violence and displacement.
In 2013, the Central African Republic witnessed a dramatic escalation of violence with the emergence of two new major players, the Seleka, a predominantly Muslim rebel coalition, and the Anti-Balaka, a predominantly Christian militia group. The Seleka, claiming to fight against marginalization and government corruption, rapidly seized control of vast swaths of the country, eventually overthrowing President François Bozizé. The Seleka's victory was short-lived and marked the beginning of a new chapter of horror in the Central African Republic's conflict. The group, riven by internal divisions and accused of widespread human rights abuses, struggled to consolidate its control over the country. The conflict forced hundreds of thousands of people to flee their homes, creating a massive humanitarian crisis.
The Central African Republic today remains trapped in a cycle of violence, poverty, and instability, its fragile peace constantly under threat. Despite the presence of international peacekeeping forces and ongoing efforts to broker a political solution, large parts of the country remain outside government control, held hostage by armed groups vying for power and resources. The armed groups, often fueled by illicit diamond and gold trades, operate with impunity, preying on the civilian population and undermining any attempts at rebuilding the country. Farmers are afraid to tend to their fields, businesses are shuttered, and schools and hospitals are often closed or abandoned due to insecurity. The constant threat of violence has created a climate of fear and mistrust, hindering any hope of reconciliation and lasting peace.
Navigating the complex landscape of the Central African Republic's conflict is like trying to find your way through a dense fog. The lines between victims and perpetrators, between political grievances and criminal agendas, are often blurred, making it difficult to disentangle the root causes of the violence and identify those responsible for the atrocities committed. The conflict has been further complicated by the involvement of external actors, regional powers seeking to secure their interests or pursue their own agendas. The flow of weapons, the recruitment of fighters, and the provision of financial support from outside the country have all contributed to fueling the violence and prolonging the suffering of the Central African people. The Central African Republic serves as a stark reminder of the limitations of international intervention and the need for sustainable peace-building efforts.
The relentless cycle of violence in the Central African Republic has exacted a devastating toll on its people. Thousands have perished in massacres, crossfires, and targeted attacks, their stories often untold. Beyond the grim body count lies a deeper, more pervasive suffering. Hundreds of thousands of Central Africans have been forced to flee their homes, seeking refuge in overcrowded and undersupplied displacement camps within the country or across its borders. These camps, while offering a temporary respite from the violence, are often plagued by disease, hunger, and a lack of basic necessities. Women and girls, particularly vulnerable in these settings, face heightened risks of sexual violence, exploitation, and trafficking. The conflict's impact extends far beyond immediate physical harm, casting a long shadow over the future of the Central African Republic, particularly its children. With schools destroyed or closed due to insecurity, an entire generation is being deprived of education. The classrooms that remain often lack basic supplies, and teachers, if they haven't fled themselves, often go unpaid for months. This disruption to education has profound and long-lasting consequences. It robs children of their right to learn, to develop their full potential, and to contribute to the rebuilding of their nation. The psychological scars of conflict run deep, with children bearing invisible wounds that can take a lifetime to heal.
The conflict has ravaged not only the lives of the Central African people, but also the very foundations of the nation. Years of fighting have left the country's infrastructure in ruins. Roads and bridges, essential for trade and transportation, lie in disrepair, isolating communities and hindering economic activity. Hospitals and clinics, already lacking essential medicines and equipment, are often damaged or destroyed in the fighting, leaving the sick and injured with little or no access to healthcare. The economy, already fragile before the conflict, has been decimated. The Central African Republic, once a nation brimming with potential, finds itself trapped in a downward spiral of conflict, poverty, and despair.
The road to recovery for the Central African Republic will be long and arduous, requiring a multifaceted approach that addresses both the immediate humanitarian crisis and the deep-seated root causes of the conflict. The international community has a moral obligation to provide robust humanitarian assistance, ensuring that those displaced by the conflict have access to food, shelter, healthcare, and other essential services. However, humanitarian aid alone cannot bring lasting peace. The international community must also support efforts to disarm and demobilize armed groups, hold perpetrators of human rights abuses accountable, and promote dialogue and reconciliation among the country's diverse communities. Investing in education, healthcare, and economic development is crucial to breaking the cycle of poverty and violence. Empowering women and youth who have borne the brunt of the conflict is essential to building a more equitable and peaceful society. The Central African Republic needs more than just a ceasefire. It needs a chance to heal, to rebuild, and to reclaim its future.
The story of the Central African Republic is one of profound tragedy and resilience. From colonialism to Bokassa's reign, from rebellion to armed groups, the country has faced immense challenges. Yet, amidst the chaos, a different narrative emerges. The Central African people show remarkable resilience and hope. They continue to exhibit courage and a deep-seated yearning for peace. In displacement camps, fields, and homes, they cling to hope. We see this resilience in mothers, teachers, and healthcare workers. They dream of a world where their voices are heard, a better future for their nation.
While the challenges facing the Central African Republic are immense, they are not insurmountable. Amidst the ongoing violence, there are glimmers of hope, fragile shoots of peace struggling to take root. Local communities are taking the initiative to build peace from the ground up. Grassroots organizations led by women, youth, and religious leaders are fostering dialogue and rebuilding trust. These local peace initiatives are crucial to achieving sustainable peace in the Central African Republic.
The crisis in the Central African Republic is a global challenge demanding a concerted response from the international community. Instability in one part of the globe can have ripple effects far beyond its borders. Addressing the conflict requires long-term commitment and sustained assistance. This includes financial and technical support to rebuild institutions and provide basic services. Justice and reconciliation are essential for lasting peace. The Central African Republic stands at a crossroads. The path ahead is fraught with challenges, but it is also one that holds the promise of a brighter future. The country's destiny will be shaped by the choices made today, by the Central African people themselves, and by the international community. Will we continue to witness the cycle of violence and despair, or will we choose a different path, one that leads to peace, justice, and reconciliation? The future of the Central African Republic is not predetermined. It is yet unwritten. It is a future that will be shaped by the courage, resilience, and determination of its people, and by the unwavering support of the international community. It is a future where the echoes of gunfire are replaced by the laughter of children playing, where fields lie fallow no longer, but burst forth with the promise of a bountiful harvest, where the seeds of hope, nurtured by the tireless efforts of peace builders, blossom into a lasting peace. It is a future worth striving for, a future we must all work together to achieve.